I am doing these Facebook Lives every Wednesday, and I am answering different questions. So if you have a question, you can email it to me. I don't think you can post it on the Facebook page, but you can send it on Twitter. I have a Facebook group called Getting a Job in Wildlife Biology. It's based off of my book, and you can join and post it there. So today I am answering the question, what does a career in academia for wildlife biologists look like? And also, if you're watching this live, or even if you're watching it later, I would just love if you would say hello, your name, where you're from. I just love getting to know my audience. Of course, my dogs are outside, and whenever I start doing a live, they start barking. They were fine for like 15 minutes. Now they're barking. Whatever. They're going to have to deal with it. Okay, so what does a career look like in academia? This is actually the thing or the career that I am most familiar with, even though I have not been employed as a professor in academia. So really, professor is the main type of job, but there are a couple of others. And when we talk about academia, we mean universities and colleges. Usually we don't mean community colleges, but you can get a job in community colleges. But usually people refer to what are called R1 or R2 institutions. So in my book, I detail this a little bit more. So here's the book. But R stands for research. So you have Research 1 and Research 2 institutions. And your career in academia will look different according to which type of university that you work for. So if you work for a Research 1 institution, these universities emphasize research. So you have to do teaching, but not as much teaching as you would do at an R2 school. R2 schools also do research, but their emphasis is more on teaching. So you're going to have a heavier teaching load if you are, I'm going to try to get centered, if you are at a Research 2 university. So jobs in academia that are professors, you have a combination of research and teaching students. And then you also are going to be having your own lab. So when you have research, you have your own lab, and your students are going to be conducting research. So for R1, you're going to have master's students, you're going to have PhD students. For R2, you're probably going to have master's students and undergrads, probably not PhD, but I'm sure there are some institutions where you can get a PhD, where you can have PhD students. So really, there's a lot that goes into having a career in academia. And like I said, it depends on what level you're at. So let's talk about R1 first. So R1, these tend to be very vigorous careers. So like I said, you have to teach classes. So usually you teach, I think 1 to 2 is usually the norm per semester, maybe 3 classes for some people. And usually teach undergraduate classes. You can teach smaller graduate classes, but teaching in itself is a lot of work. I taught a lecture for mammalogy when I graduated in 2013, and I was actually co-lecturing with another professor. So the topic was chosen and the slides were made, although the slides were really only just like pictures. It was mammalogy. It was just like pictures of monkeys for like the primate lesson. So I had to fill in a lot of the gaps. But I remember it really took me like 8 hours at least to make a single lecture, because you're making a talk essentially that is 45 minutes long if you have a 15-minute class. So it's a lot of work. So you have to teach, but really what R1 universities care about, they care about your research. So they care about publications, they care about peer-reviewed publications, and they care about your ability, or actually your ability to have secured grants. And they want big grants. The universities, they bring in money through these grants, through these professors. So if you're at an R1 university, you are going to have to be writing a lot of grants. Your students will be conducting research. You will be conducting research too, but really a lot more of your role will be managing your students and managing their research. So in graduate school as a student, you conduct either a thesis or a dissertation, and then you have an advisor. So the graduate students are the ones doing all the data collection, all the data analysis, the writing, and your advisor, which is being a professor in academia, is there to help you along and guide you. And of course, they might help out with parts of that, but really so much of it is on you. And again, you will have your own projects as a professor, but you're not really going to be going to the field, definitely not as frequently as graduate students. If you go to the field, a lot of times it's like site visits to oversee things. And yes, you can do data and field or data collection and field work, but it's not going to be like what you were doing in graduate school, or if you're more in a field tech position. So you're going to be mentoring a lab. You'll probably have lab meetings. You'll have students doing all different sorts of research. You're going to be writing grants to fund those students, to fund your research. The university wants big grants, so you're going to have to write for wildlife biology. This is National Science Foundation grants. They're the biggest grants you can get in wildlife biology. And National Science Foundation doesn't care about conservation; they care about science. So you can do wildlife management type of work, but it has to be in a theoretical context, so that you can get those National Science Foundation grants, and those run in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. If you do something disease related, you can apply for grants at the National Institutes of Health. But other than that, really your only other options for grants are zoos. There's some private grants that you can apply for, or some federal grants. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has endangered species grants, but these are in the tens of thousands of dollars of range. And honestly, universities don't care about that much money, that much money. So it sounds like a lot of money to us, but it's not to them. And I know somebody who didn't get tenure because although they raised lots of money, it was from all these different small grants, and that was one of the reasons. So there's a lot that goes on in this discussion, but tenure is the process you go through. It's like a 5-year trial period, essentially, where you have to prove yourself as an assistant professor. And what they care about are your publications, how frequently you're publishing, but they also care about the quality of publications too. So what journals are you in? So it's not always the more publications you have, the better. You want to have publications in good journals too, but you don't want to have too few publications. So it's a balance between those things and between securing grants. So at the end of about 5 years, the department reviews your tenure application. They look at all your publications. They look at your grants. They do take into account your course evaluations and how you teach, but that's really not what makes tenure from what I've heard. If you don't have those other things and you're a great teacher, you're not going to get tenure. So that's for an R1 institution. And I personally never wanted to go into R1 research because although I really love research, it is really, really vigorous. People say they call it publish or perish. So you basically have to be like publishing so much, or you die, but you lose your job. Oh, and then once you get tenure, you essentially have your job for life. It's very difficult to get fired. Now, of course, you can do things to get fired, such as like sexual harassment, things like that. But the idea of tenure is to protect your intellectual freedom and creativity, because the principle is founded off of you don't want to fire people if they have maybe a more provocative or interesting or controversial scientific idea or thought. So that's the idea behind tenure, to protect faculty and keeping their jobs. So that's R1. R2 universities, like I said, they will emphasize teaching more. So you will still do research, but not as much, and you still go through a tenure process, but the standards are a little bit different. So they do care about publications, they do care about what journals you publish in, they do care about grants, but they're not going to care. You don't have the higher standards as you do as R1. So you have probably fewer publications per year and not as much grant money. So I'm not sure about the details of that, but I think the tens of thousands of dollars of grants would be fine for our two universities. And it looks like we got some new people coming in. So if you guys want to comment and say where you're from and just say hi, I like hearing from you guys. So those are the main jobs at universities. You can also get a job as a lecturer. Usually these are temporary positions. And it seems to be more and more like that. They don't make a lot of money. You can also get other jobs at universities, like you can work in the staff for some capacity. So there's jobs maybe in social media and outreach. You could be an academic advisor. There's lots of people who have their PhDs and then go on to teach and advise undergrads. Oh, and I forgot to say with the R2 universities, they care a lot about your course evaluations and how you are as a teacher. So that's more, or as a professor. So that's more where you are weighted on. Okay, and then there are some positions at universities that are only research based. These are pretty rare, and there is a cool position where you can have it joint, usually with, I believe it's with the federal government, where you're doing research only, and these are called co-op positions. So I'm not sure, I think you mentor students, but you don't really have a lab. So maybe you're mentoring like 1 or 2 students, and I don't think you go through tenure at all. I think it's completely separate. But you are expected to publish, but you have more freedom to do applied research. So in terms of the research with academia, if you're at an R1, it's a balance, because wildlife biology is science, but it's much more applied science. So for example, in one of the labs I worked in, one of the students was studying a reintroduced bear population in the state, and they were conducting genetic research on this bear population. And so this was in conjunction with the state agency there, and the state agency actually was funding this project. So this was very much a wildlife management project. So the state agency wanted to know how many bears they had and where they came from. So that's not the type of question that's really going to get into more vigorous or higher peer-reviewed academic journals. So in order for this to be more of a theoretical concept and get published, the student had to then they published papers on new methods they developed for genetics, and understanding more the evolutionary history of this. It was bears and I said it was bears in the context of the larger continental range. So yeah, you're going to have to spin it in a more theoretical context. If you're interested in like really applied stuff, it can be more challenging, but it can definitely be done. So I hope this helps you figure out about jobs in academia. And this question came from YouTube. So I think it's from Lydia. So thank you so much, Lydia, for asking this question. It's a great question. I should also mention that academia gives you the most freedom in terms of what kind of research you want to do. So as I got my PhD working on elephants, and there's very few jobs in the United States, really only zoo jobs, and these jobs really rarely come up where you can do elephant research. And academia usually has more freedom. So they'll have a posting for like a wildlife ecologist or a mammologist or a conservation biologist. Sometimes they'll have in mind exactly what type of biologist they want. So sometimes they want an entomologist or I don't know, just someone particular. Maybe they want a carnivore biologist to accent a particular part of their department, or they're replacing faculty that had already been there. But you have more flexibility in choosing your research topics. Whereas if you were a wildlife biologist, say for a state agency or the federal government, you might be able to come up with your own projects, but they likely have to fit into what the state or the government prioritizes as important. Okay, so thanks again for watching. I'm here every Wednesday at 12, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your week.